In a moment unlike any other, South Africa became the stage for a powerful and emotional farewell. Former President Edgar Lungu's body was placed on public display, and what followed was truly unexpected. From the sea of mourners to silent reactions from key political figures, this wasn't just a viewing, it was a statement to the world. But behind the scenes, something deeper was happening. What did the cameras really capture? What did they miss? And what message does this send to Zambia, Africa, and the world? Stay with us, because what you're about to see may change how you remember this day forever. In this powerful and emotional documentary, we take you inside the rare public viewing of former Zambian President Edgar Chagwa Lungu's remains in South Africa. Shocking footage, hidden details, and untold reactions from both his family and South African authorities reveal the tension, politics, and legacy surrounding Lungu's final moments. Was this truly a moment of honor or a silent protest? What role did Esther Lungu, South African courts, and Zambian officials play behind the scenes? And what did the cameras really reveal that the news didn't? Don't forget to subscribe for more exclusive reports from InspirAfrica official. South Africa hosts Lungu's final viewing. Edgar Lungu, Zambia's sixth president from 2015 to 2021, died at the age of 68 in a South African hospital on June 5, 2025, after receiving treatment for an undisclosed illness. Following his death, South Africa became the stage for his final viewing, a significant event that drew attention due to the contentious circumstances surrounding his funeral arrangements. The viewing took place at the Cathedral of Christ the King in Johannesburg, where mourners gathered to pay their respects. This event was not merely a ceremonial farewell, but a flashpoint in a broader dispute between Lungu's family and the Zambian government, led by his political rival, President Hichilema. The decision to hold the viewing in South Africa rather than Zambia stemmed from the family's insistence on honoring Lungu's alleged wish for a private ceremony, free from Hichilema's involvement, reflecting the deep-seated animosity between the two leaders. The choice of South Africa as the venue was significant for several reasons. Lungu had been receiving medical treatment there, and his family, particularly his widow, Esther Lungu, argued that South African law granted her the authority to decide the burial arrangements as the surviving spouse. The viewing was initially part of a planned private burial in Johannesburg, organized by Lungu's family and his political party, the Patriotic Front (PF). However, the Zambian government's intervention, seeking a state funeral in Zambia, led to a South African court halting the burial on June 25, 2025, turning the viewing into a poignant and politically charged moment. The event underscored the tension between personal wishes and national interests, setting the stage for a legal and political battle that captivated both Zambian and South African audiences. This viewing was not just a farewell to a former head of state, but a reflection of Zambia's polarized political landscape. Lungu's presidency was marked by significant infrastructure development, such as a road-building program, but also by economic challenges and accusations of authoritarianism, including the imprisonment of Hichilema in 2017 on treason charges. The decision to hold the viewing in South Africa, rather than repatriating Lungu's body to Zambia, was seen by some as a rejection of the Zambian government's authority and a statement of defiance by Lungu's family and supporters. Mourners gather, the emotional crowd reactions. The final viewing of Edgar Lungu at the Cathedral of Christ the King in Johannesburg was a deeply emotional event for those who attended. Mourners, including members of Lungu's family, supporters from the Patriotic Front, and ordinary citizens, gathered to honor a leader who had left a complex legacy in Zambia. The emotional weight of the occasion was amplified by the uncertainty surrounding the burial, as the South African court's last-minute order on June 25, 2025, halted the planned private burial, leaving mourners in a state of confusion and grief. Reports describe a somber atmosphere at the cathedral, with mourners arriving to attend a mass that had been intended as part of the funeral proceedings. The news of the court's intervention was only announced after the mass had concluded, adding to the emotional turmoil. For many, the viewing was an opportunity to reflect on Lungu's contributions to Zambia, including his infrastructure projects and his role as a unifying figure for some communities. However, his presidency was also controversial, marked by economic struggles and allegations of corruption, which meant that reactions among mourners were varied. Supporters of the PF expressed grief mixed with anger, believing that the Zambian government's actions were disrespectful to Lungu's memory and his family's wishes. Esther Lungu, the former First Lady, was a central figure at the viewing, visibly upset as she navigated the dual roles of grieving widow and advocate for her husband's wishes. The crowd's reactions were further shaped by the political undertones of the event, with some mourners viewing the government's intervention as an attempt to control Lungu's legacy for political gain. The emotional intensity was palpable, as the viewing became a space where personal loss intersected with public and political narratives, highlighting the deep divisions within Zambian society. Security tightens, government presence, and protocol. The viewing in Johannesburg was marked by heightened security measures, reflecting the high-profile nature of the event and the underlying tensions between the Lungu family and the Zambian government. The presence of South African and Zambian officials underscored the diplomatic and political stakes involved. The Zambian government, keen on asserting its authority over the funeral arrangements, had sent delegations to South Africa, including Foreign Minister Malambo Haimbi, to negotiate with Lungu's family. These negotiations were fraught, as the family accused the government of deviating from agreed-upon plans, particularly regarding regarding Hichilema's role in the funeral. Security protocols were tightened around the Cathedral of Christ the King, with arrangements in place to manage the crowd and ensure the safety of attendees, including high-profile figures from the PF and Lungu's family. The South African government, caught in the middle of the dispute, maintained a neutral stance, emphasizing its obligation to respect the family's wishes while acknowledging the Zambian government's interest in a state funeral. The presence of security forces was also a precaution against potential unrest, given the polarized sentiments surrounding Lungu's death and the ongoing legal battle. The Zambian government's insistence on a state funeral was rooted in protocol, as all former Zambian presidents since independence in 1964 have been buried at the Embassy Memorial Park in Lusaka. This precedent was cited by officials like Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, who argued that national interest should supersede personal wishes. The tightened security and government presence at the viewing were thus not only logistical, but also symbolic of the state's attempt to assert control over a process that had become a public spectacle. Who attended? The Lungu family and Esther's role. The viewing was attended by a range of individuals, including Lungu's immediate family, members of the Patriotic Front, and supporters who traveled from Zambia to South Africa. Key figures included Esther Lungu, Lungu's widow, and their children, notably Tasila Lungu, who has been a prominent figure in Zambian politics. Other family members, such as Lungu's sister-in-law Bertha, nephew Charles Fairai, and children Dalitso and Chieso, were also involved in the legal proceedings surrounding the funeral. Esther Lungu played a central role, both as a grieving spouse and as the primary advocate for her husband's wishes. According to court filings, Esther asserted her legal authority under South African law to determine her husband's burial arrangements, emphasizing that Lungu had explicitly instructed that Hichilema should not be involved in his funeral. Her presence at the viewing was marked by visible emotion as she arrived at the cathedral shortly after the court's order halted the burial. Esther's role extended beyond the ceremonial, as she became a focal point in the legal battle, filing affidavits that accused the Zambian government of causing emotional and financial distress by disrupting the planned funeral. The attendance of PF members, including top party officials, highlighted the political dimension of the viewing. The PF's decision to organize a memorial service at Pretoria's Sacred Heart Cathedral earlier in June, attended by Esther and other family members, had already set the stage for the viewing as a PF-supported event. The absence of Hichilema and other senior government officials at the viewing further underscored the rift, as the family's insistence on excluding Hichilema shaped the guest list and the tone of the event. Behind the cameras, what wasn't shown? While media coverage captured the public aspects of the viewing, mourners, the mass, and Esther Lungu's presence, much of the behind-the-scenes dynamics went unreported. The negotiations between the Zambian government and Lungu's family were complex and fraught, involving multiple delegations and diplomatic efforts. For instance, Southern African leaders, including Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa, attempted to mediate but were unsuccessful in resolving the dispute before the court's intervention. The financial and emotional toll on the Lungu family was significant but less visible. Court documents reveal that the family incurred costs of up to $1 million, approximately $55,000 for funeral arrangements, including venue hire, transport, clergy, and security, all of which were rendered moot by the court's order. The family's accusations that the Zambian government's lawyer, Hemisha Gawala, misled the court with false claims about the funeral arrangements added another layer of contention, with the family threatening to report her to South Africa's Legal Practice Council. Additionally, the PF's narrative that Lungu's death was partly due to the Zambian government's alleged restrictions on his travel for medical treatment was a contentious point that received less attention in mainstream coverage. The government denied these claims, but they fueled the family's distrust and their determination to keep the funeral private. These behind-the-scenes elements reveal a story of mistrust, legal maneuvering, and a family grappling with grief while navigating a high-stakes political battle. Legal battle continues. August 4th court update. The legal battle over Edgar Lungu's burial reached a critical juncture with a South African court's order on June 25, 2025, halting the planned burial in Johannesburg. The Pretoria High Court, responding to an urgent application by Zambia's Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, ruled that no burial could proceed until the dispute over the funeral's location and nature was resolved. The court scheduled a full hearing for August 4, 2025, to determine whether Lungu's body should be repatriated to Zambia for a state funeral or buried in South Africa as per the family's wishes. The Lungu family, represented by lawyer Makibi Zulu, argued that the Zambian government's intervention was politically motivated and caused significant distress. They sought a punitive cost order against the government, citing expenses incurred for the cancelled funeral and alleging bad faith by the state. The family's filings emphasized that South African law grants Esther Lungu, as the surviving spouse, the authority to decide her husband's burial, and they dismissed Zambian legal precedents, such as the case of Kenneth Konda, as inapplicable in South Africa. The Zambian government, conversely, argued that Lungu's status as a former president necessitated a state funeral at Embassy Memorial Park in Lusaka, in line with national tradition. They cited the public interest and the need to allow all Zambians to pay their respects. The August 4th hearing was poised to address these conflicting claims, with the outcome likely to set a precedent for how such disputes are handled in the future. The family's additional accusations against the government's lawyer for misleading the court added complexity, potentially influencing the court's view on the state's conduct. Why this viewing was political. The viewing of Edgar Lungu's body was inherently political due to the long-standing rivalry between Lungu and Hichilema, which extended beyond their lifetimes. Lungu's presidency saw Hichilema imprisoned for over 100 days in 2017 on treason charges, an incident that symbolized their bitter feud. After Hichilema's victory in the 2021 election, Lungu accused the new government of targeting him and his family with harassment and corruption charges, including against Esther and their children. Lungu's attempt to return to politics in 2023, only to be barred by the Constitutional Court, further intensified the animosity. The viewing became a political flashpoint because it encapsulated this rivalry. The Lungu family's decision to hold the funeral in South Africa was seen as a direct rebuke of Hichilema's authority, reinforced by Lungu's alleged instruction that Hichilema should not attend his funeral. The PF's involvement, directing mourners to its headquarters rather than the government's designated venue in Lusaka, further politicized the event. The Zambian government's push for a state funeral was perceived by the family and PF as an attempt to co-opt Lungu's legacy for political gain, particularly ahead of the 2026 elections. The viewing also highlighted broader tensions in Zambian politics, including accusations that Hichilema's anti-corruption campaign disproportionately targeted PF members. The family's claim that Lungu's death was linked to restricted access to medical treatment abroad added fuel to the narrative of political persecution, making the viewing a stage for competing claims about Lungu's legacy and the government's intentions. South African versus Zambian narratives. The dispute over Lungu's funeral gave rise to divergent narratives in South Africa and Zambia. In South Africa, the focus was on the legal and humanitarian aspects of the case. The South African government maintained a neutral stance, emphasizing its respect for the family's wishes while acknowledging Zambia's interest in a state funeral. Media coverage, such as in the Daily Maverick, highlighted Esther Lungu's affidavit and the family's claim that Lungu's medical treatment was delayed due to travel restrictions, framing the issue as a matter of personal rights and dignity. In Zambia, the narrative was more polarized. The government, through officials like Kabesha and Haimbi, argued that Lungu's status as a former president entitled the nation to honor him with a state funeral, citing the precedent of Kenneth Kanda's burial at Embassy Memorial Park despite family objections. They portrayed the family's resistance as a politicization of a national matter. Conversely, the PF and Lungu supporters accused the government of exploiting the funeral for public relations and continuing its alleged persecution of Lungu's allies. Outlets like the Zambian Observer amplified the family's grievances, with some articles suggesting that the family's insistence on a South African burial was a strategy to shield themselves from corruption probes in Zambia. These competing narratives reflected deeper cultural and political differences. In South Africa, the emphasis on individual rights aligned with the legal argument that Esther Lungu had the authority to decide her husband's burial. In Zambia, the focus on national tradition and collective mourning underscored the government's position, highlighting the tension between personal autonomy and state protocol. The final frame, Lungu's legacy lives on. Edgar Lungu's legacy is a complex tapestry of achievements and controversies that continues to shape Zambian politics. His presidency was marked by significant infrastructure development, particularly in road construction, which earned him praise from supporters. However, his tenure was also criticized for economic mismanagement, leading to Zambia's debt crisis, and for authoritarian measures, such as Hichilema's imprisonment. Lungu's return to politics in 2023, despite legal barriers, underscored his enduring influence as a leader of the PF and the Tons Alliance. The viewing in South Africa and the surrounding dispute have cemented Lungu's legacy as a polarizing figure. For his supporters, he remains a symbol of resistance against perceived political persecution by Hichilema's government. The family's legal battle and their accusations of government overreach have kept Lungu's narrative alive, framing him as a leader betrayed by the system, as articulated by Makibi Zulu. For critics, the dispute highlights the controversies of his presidency, including allegations of corruption involving his family, which some claim they are attempting to evade through self-imposed exile in South Africa. The unresolved nature of Lungu's burial, pending the August 4, 2025 court hearing, ensures that his legacy will continue to be debated. Whether he is ultimately buried in South Africa or Zambia, the events surrounding his death have exposed deep divisions in Zambian society, reflecting the challenges of reconciling personal wishes with national interests. Lungu's story, as encapsulated in the final viewing, serves as a reminder of the enduring impact of political rivalries and the complex interplay of power, grief, and justice. Conclusion. The final viewing of Edgar Lungu in South Africa was a multifaceted event that transcended a simple farewell to a former president. It was a moment of profound grief for his family and supporters, a legal battleground over the rights to his body, and a political spectacle that highlighted the deep rift between Lungu's allies and the Zambian government. The emotional reactions of mourners, the tightened security, Esther Lungu's central role, and the behind-the-scenes negotiations all underscored the complexity of the situation. The ongoing legal battle, set to continue on August 4, 2025, and the competing South African and Zambian narratives further illustrate the broader implications of Lungu's death. His legacy, marked by both achievements and controversies, continues to resonate, ensuring that the events surrounding his viewing remain a significant chapter in Zambia's political history.